So I'm asked to solve the equation 5 over x minus 8 over x plus 1 equals 1. Now, it doesn't really matter that the x's are underneath the fractions. We're going to do the same thing that we always do, which is start by multiplying every term by every denominator. This will get rid of every fraction and allow us to continue on with brackets and collecting terms. So I'm going to multiply by x, and I'm going to multiply by x plus 1. I'm going to do that on every term, making sure I remember to go across the equal sign as well. Dividing by x and multiplying by x cancel out. Dividing by x plus 1 and multiplying by x plus 1 cancel out. And I now follow the instructions that I've created. My first term becomes 5 times x plus 1. My next term is minus 8x, and on the other side I've got x times x plus 1. If you want to multiply out your brackets on this stage, you can, but be aware that because you're doing more than one thing at once, there's a decent chance you'll end up making mistakes some of the time. That's why I like to separate getting rid of the fractions and multiplying out the brackets into 2 steps. Now I'm going to get rid of my brackets. 5x plus 5 minus 8x is equal to x squared plus x. And as soon as that x squared term appears, I need to think of this thing that it's a quadratic, and I want to organize it as x squared x number equals 0. So on this side I've got 5x minus 8x, which is minus 3x. I'm going to move it up to the other side where it becomes a plus 3x. That's going to give me x squared, and x plus 3x is 4x. I'm going to move that 5 across as well, and it becomes a minus 5. And this thing equals 0. So, I'm still at a stage where I haven't solved the equation, but I've organized it ready to solve, given that it's a quadratic. It hasn't told me what method to use. I could use the formula, I could complete the square, or I could try and factorize. It hasn't told me to round my answers, so I suspect that it might factorize, but I don't have to. It hasn't told me to. This equation does factorize, so that's what I'm going to do now. An x at the beginning of this bracket, and 2 numbers that multiply to make 5 and subtract to make 4, well, that's 5 and 1. To get a positive 4, I need a plus 5 and a minus 1, and then I get to look at each factor separately and find out when they equal 0. For this bracket, that would mean x equals minus 5, and for this bracket, that would mean x equals 1. And those are the solutions to the equation. Now I'm going to get rid of all of this, because I need plenty of room to do the next problem, which looks kind of scary. This one isn't even a quadratic equation. This one ends up being a power of 5, whereas quadratics only go as high as a power of 2. So you might look at this thing and say, well, I've never dealt with something like that before, but it's absolutely fine. We're going to use the same principles that we always use. In general, as a piece of exam technique, if you see a question style that you've never seen before, don't panic. They are still testing you on the same skills that you've applied to other questions, and just apply them and hope for the best. So, the equation x cubed over 8 minus 2 over x squared equals 6 minus x can be written in the form they show us, and I want to find the values of a, b, and c. Well, I might not be quite sure how to do that at first, but if I'm looking at this equation, I certainly see that it can be simplified by getting rid of the fractions. So I'm going to do what I always do, and I'm going to multiply every term by every denominator. That means every term is going to get multiplied by 8 and by x squared. I'm going to look for the places where the 8's cancel out and the x squareds cancel out, and then I'm going to follow the instructions that I've created to make the next line. X cubed times x squared. Laws of indices, I add the powers, that gets me x to the power of 5. 2 times 8, or rather minus 2 times 8, that's 16. 6 times 8 is 48, times x squared is of course 48x squared. And minus x times x squared is minus x cubed, times 8 is minus 8x cubed. Now notice they've arranged their equation equal to 0. The highest power has gone first and the powers are decreasing, just as they would do if it was a quadratic problem. So I'm going to follow their example and arrange my equation this way as well. That means I'm going to write it as x to the 5. Then I'm going to bring my x cubed term over the equals, making it plus 8x cubed. Then I'm going to bring my x squared term across the equals, making it minus 48x squared. And the minus 16 will stay where it is, so I get 0 on the other side. So they've said show it can be written as x to the 5, which I've got, plus something x cubed. Well, that means the something must be 8, because I got 8x cubed, plus something times x squared. Well, my something is minus 48, so b equals minus 48, plus a number, plus some number, c. And my number is 16, so c must be 16. So I do what I've always done. I simplify my equation, and at the end, the method becomes that little bit more obvious what I'm supposed to do with this thing. And the last question will be dealt with in the last video.